Hello and welcome to Tippcast Live with myself, Shane Stapleton, and Nina Guardian Sports Editor, Shane Brophy, as ever. Get your comments, questions, whatever you want in here. We have another packed show coming, as ever we do here. We're also going to be joined by Enda Tracy to talk about the Tipperary Camogie semi-final. Unfortunately, a bit of heartbreak there against Galway. The Tipp ladies footballers, they had a good day out for Declan Carr and co beating Tyrone. There's all the club championship. We'll also be joined by Thomas Conway and Paul Jenkins of Tipp FM. So Shane Brophy, we can't but ignore the fact that another week has slipped by and still no Tipperary hurling manager. That's the first order of business here.
Yeah, sure. Look, a lot changed since we were on last Wednesday week, and then 24 hours later when I was just listening to your show and that news was, or your show with Michael Verney, that the news broke that Liam Cahill was staying put. It was Jesus, I'd say for 5 or 6 hours after, I still wasn't the best of it. Just trying to get your head about what actually happened, and God, how could he reject it? Why did he reject it? And things like that. So I sure think everybody's moved on, and I suppose the focus now on who is going to be the next manager. So it's it's just everyone's asking the same question, but there's no standout candidate now. But I don't know. I think that whoever the new manager will be get a slight bit more leeway, because I definitely think Cahill would have got a lot of leeway if he got in there, because he was the number one candidate among practically everyone. So, but now that he's rejected it, and people have to accept that maybe, okay, we didn't get our number one guy. Whoever we get now probably will need a little bit of time. So we'll wait and see. We could be surprised by who we get, and we could be into if they gel together with the squad. Who knows?
Yeah, it really is unprecedented to have a statement coming out like that from a guy who's inter-county manager of one, to inform us that he's not taking a job of another. What have you been hearing? What's being said at the water cooler?
Sure. Look, it's from talking to various people. I don't think there was any one thing that was the deal breaker for Liam Cahill and Michael Beavens. As far as I'm aware, they met twice with the county board, the committee, and most things were fairly well. There was nothing broke down on anything issue. They did look for 4 years. County board more or less said, look, we only work on 3-year deals. That this is with any manager, said. But look, if the things were going well after 1 or 2 years, it's easily extend that. So that's not a deal breaker.
Well, that's not worth the paper it's printed on either way. It's Tipp County Board should have said, there's a 100-year deal. It doesn't make a difference.
No, it doesn't. I think the under-20 manager role, I think that had some part to play in it. That Brendan Cummins was more or less ready to go as under-20 manager, and that the county board were not prepared to renege on the agreement made with him that he would be coming in, and he's bringing Fintan O'Connor in with him. Fintan lives in Ardfin, and the former Kerry manager, they worked together with Kerry for a couple of years. So you think that they're a nice fit there together. But I've no reason to think that Liam Cahill and Brendan Cummins don't get on. But I know last year in Waterford, when the under-20 manager's job was up for reconfirmation, that Cahill backed the management team, the outgoing management team, to stay on rather than a new candidate that put his hands, and the county board went with what Cahill wanted. There's a lot of blame coming on the county board to think of what did we woo Cahill enough? Did we do enough to maybe make it attractive, or that did we just expect that maybe because of the Tipp job that he would maybe take a little bit less to come back? And I know Waterford made a serious attempts to keep him, and it worked. And I think up to last Wednesday, the Waterford chairman went to Liam Cahill's house in Ballingarry, and that looks to be where the final decision was made. And there's rumours that maybe an extra financial package was made available, not for Cahill, but to for the development of the senior team itself. Maybe money to maybe develop players, maybe one-on-one coaching, maybe for some guys that maybe need a little bit extra. So I like to say, from talking to somebody in Waterford who be very, very close to the have their ear to the ground, he was saying that most of the Waterford players were very shocked when they heard Cahill was coming back. Like they were expecting him to go. Like, so I would think that, like, with that statement came out last Thursday morning, I would think up to Wednesday night, Liam Cahill was still, and Michael Beavens were still trying, knocking it around in their head to decide what to do. And like I said in the piece in the Guardian this week, you think logically they made the right call. If you were looking at it coldly and taking the Tipperary rose tinted glasses out of your face, like, Waterford probably, they've 2 years work done. They have a lot of stability there. Potentially they have 4 very key players, maybe 5. Like Maurice Shanahan's doing bloody everything to be brought back in, and you think, Jesus, if like Cal made a decision to get rid of him 2 years ago, if you have a guy who's scoring 5-13 in the club game, like, I think you've got to eat a bit of humble pie and say this guy will offer something for Waterford. Like, so, and you think maybe they've taken that at maybe they're closer to winning an All Ireland with Waterford than would be maybe with Tipperary at the moment.
Yeah, same time, like Cahill faced Limerick 3 times in the last year or so in Championship, and it's combined something like, is it 27-point defeat between the 3 of them? So Tipperary got within 5 points, and even at that, we talked about ways of maybe more youth playing in that game, and maybe it'd be closer again. What I can't get over is just that it seems to be in the space of a week or a day or two, more or less than that the whole thing broke down. I'm going to bring in Enda Tracy here and Paul Jenkins and just throw it out to you as well. I'll start off with you, Paul, as well. Where to next for Tipp? Because, we've heard a few names floating around, but it kind of feels like nothing is happening just now.
Yeah, and it's funny, and I'm down here in Dungarvan, so I'm hearing a lot of what the Waterford lads are saying and things like that, and they're pure delighted. Cahill is saying, as Shane was saying, they were surprised he's staying on, but they're over the moon about it, that he's going to be here for another while yet. Hard to know where to go after. I was talking to Shane McGrath there over the weekend. He was on about Darragh Egan, the same old usual faces and things like that, but yeah, where do you go? It's almost, is it a poison chalice now in some ways? Who comes in and takes it on? I don't have the answer anyway, lads. It's hard to know, but all I do know is they're delighted to have Liam Cahill down here for another while.
Yeah, what do you think, Enda?
Yeah, it's hard to know where they go from here, and they're coming out saying they're going to take their time, but that's more of a case of a lack of outstanding candidates than they've too many options on their table. So, based on the lads that have been floated around there's not too many with much inter-county experience at underage level or at senior level. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction they go in. If it could be a lottery now, I couldn't give you a best guess.
And the thing is, Shane, like, this is the big concern now, that no matter who we pick, because there's this feeling that Tipperary won't go outside Tipp, that you're probably picking whatever candidate you pick. They could be great candidates. They could end up winning it all for Tipperary. But just looking plainly at the CV, there aren't too many where you're saying, well, look, he's got the experience. He's road tested. We know he can do it. So then you start wondering, like, would the old taboo of going outside the county, is that possible? Micheál Donoghue's a name that's been mentioned, and he was part of Eamon O'Shea's backroom.
Yeah, like I surprisingly enough, the more I've talked to people, the less I don't think that could be an issue. Like, I just think I think that there is an acceptance that there's no one outstanding candidate, and you would think I know you would have worked with Willie Maher for a couple of years. Like, he put his hat in the ring 2-3 years ago. He was probably, I know people said Cahill was the one snubbed when Sheedy came back, but I think everybody was saying that Maher was going to be the one who was going to get the job before Sheedy came in. So look, like, I think Maher, he's a very impressive guy when you listen to him. He always seems to be well organised, and I'm sure he would put a strong management team together. I don't think it should be just the manager looking down, like, and you got to look at the whole package. And like, I know, I think Maher gets unfairly tagged for like 2016 and losing that Munster under 21 final to Waterford. Like, that's in a Waterford team, under 21 team, that's practically backboning the Waterford seniors now. And like, there was very, very few Tipp seniors came off that under 20 bunch, and like, that was an under 20 bunch to beat a very good Limerick team in the semi-final. And then the following year he managed the Tipp under 21s, and they lost in the first round to Limerick. They had 7 of the Limerick team that started in the All-Ireland senior final. Like, we got very few, like Brian Hogan maybe, and a couple more. Like, we got very few off that team, and there was nothing expected of that under 21 team in 2017. So like, he's one, like, in terms of continuity, I would, the Darragh Egan thing would appeal to me, because like I would know his form for a long number of years, even going back into into the 20s, where like he would have been central to a lot of what Killadangan did, getting their underage structures right, and he would have a lot of links there in terms of putting a good management team in place. He's one. He's another. Like after that, like I say, Micheál Donoghue's name, I'm not sure whether there's going to anything come from that, but only because he would have been involved with Tipp in 2015 when Eamon O'Shea was there. So, like by all accounts, Nicky English has ruled himself out. Would Liam Sheedy come back and do another year or two? I think by all accounts, Liam was tempted to come back and do one more year, but I think the county board were probably looking at maybe a long-term commitment, like so. But could they go back there and say, Liam, hold the fort for another year? But surely you don't really want to do that either. So, and look, maybe you go left field. Maybe some as a name I put out there in my piece this week is somebody like Declan Laffin, who had great success with Lockmore Castellini. I think he wouldn't have he wouldn't have inter-county experience even at underage level, but God, he was always able to get a Lockmore team, hurling or football, well prepared any year. So
yeah, and I definitely don't see the downside of people with football experience too, like Mick Dempsey, his influence with Brian Cody, and then obviously what we're seeing with Paul Kinnerk and Beauclair and then Limerick. Like hurling is evolving in the direction of Gaelic football in a lot of ways. Obviously they're very different, but there are certain elements where there's sort of a tie over. And just want to move on to the Camogie. Obviously, it was a very disappointing day for Tipperary last Sunday. Galway winning 113 to 12 points. Is that what you came away with, just thinking, just a bit of frustration? 4 semi-finals in a row and the breakthrough hasn't quite happened?
Yeah, frustrating from the result, but in the other semi-finals gone by, maybe you thought they didn't have the quality to do it and they were kind of only hanging on. But the last day, they created so many chances where they could have, when pushed on, when they had Galway in their sights. I think just there in the last quarter in particular, Claude McIntyre had a couple of great goal chances, and Olar Dwyer as well. Like, I've been blue in the face coming on here telling you that the difference between Tipp getting to that step further is going to be getting goals in the big matches. And in fairness, they probably had that earmarked and they seemed to be going for goals, maybe when the better option might have been to tip over a few points, particularly when there was like 1 or 2 points in the game there coming down the last 15 minutes. But look, it's savagely disappointing, and it's something they're going to have to learn from. I know. Look, it's hard to go back to the well every year with the disappointment. You're getting closer and closer, but you're still not making that breakthrough. So it's one they left behind them, I think, more so than the other years.
Yeah, would you agree, Shane?
Yeah, like I did mention last week when we had Geraldine Canan on, I was worried about the semi-final being played in Croke Park, and I just thought for the first 30 minutes, Tipp looked very, very nervous. Like they were very jittery. Like if it's the 1 year, maybe if this match had been played anywhere but Croke Park, I think they would have played the match on its merits. And like we saw in the last 20 minutes, they completely dominated Galway. It's just that the deficit, like they got it back to a point, and just they had chances, and like, just such a pity. Like it just that Taran Kennedy roared into the game. For McGrath, like it was just relentless attacking. Like just missed chances. If they'd gotten the goal, I think they would have pushed on and won by a couple of points. It's just that I just think that bit of composure and experience Galway had was the difference on the day. And I just think it could have been a lost year for Tipp. It's just unfortunate. They say any other year. What we would say, we blame Tyrone for this too, because if they hadn't got their delay, those 2 Camogie semis would have been probably played down in the Gaelic grounds or somewhere, or Nolan Park, where you probably it's just a normal Camogie came out. I just hope they stick together. I know maybe Bill and some people would say it maybe is a time for change. I don't think it is. Like I think they definitely this year. They did look on a par with the other 3. But as Enda says, it's just so hard to win these games. It's just so hard to get over the winning hump and beat one of them.
Yeah, I mean the experience of likes of Aoife Donoghue, who scored 3 points. Niamh Kilkenny is always keeping the ball moving. But there were a lot of positives. Orla Dwyer, I mean the shape she's in after coming back from being down under is pretty obvious, and like there were a lot of positives, and you'd hate to put it down to a mistake, but like I mean, it was very costly when you felt very sorry for Caoimhe Burke the way that ball went in, Paul.
Yeah, and just another thing I'd like to touch on as well. Obviously, Caoimhe Burke was very unfortunate with that, and it's something that's in the ladies' game as well. Mick Bohan, the Dublin ladies manager, has talked about it a good bit. is the rules and how the players are getting more physical. They're able for more challenges. They're able for other things. And in the Europe there, you probably saw a better view of it. But the Orla Dwyer incident where she was running through and looked to have been a Stonewall penalty, the free went the other way and a yellow card was given for charging. Was there much said about that at the end, or what was kind of the result of that?
Yeah, it's a fair question.
Not much said at the end. I remember I was up in the media box and I just let out a roar, what? And everyone around me looking at me. I couldn't understand what the decision was for. There was a few dodgy enough decisions on the day. As far as I was concerned, she had a pat through on goal and the Galway player came across her and kind of tried to hold her up. Very harsh. But that was just one of about 4 or 5 chances that they had. Just giving the wrong hand pass or not taking on the shot themselves, just that decision making in the split second that, you know, they have to get the grasp with if they want to get it one step further, you know.
Yeah. Like Bill Mullaney, do you feel he's the right man for the job, Enda?
I think so, yeah. I think the players really respect him and I think he has a good rapport with the players and, you know, he's not too pig-headed that he's down the line and he has to do the same thing over and over again. You can see he brought in Dennis Kelly and Angelo Walsh this year and they seem to have made a big difference to the game plan and the physique of the players. So I think if he wants to stay on, that's another question. I'm not sure. He looked very disappointed after the game the last day, very dejected. So, look, if he wants to stay on, I'd give him more time because they're going in the right direction. I mean, we're saying that for the last couple of years, but eventually if they keep playing like that and they start taking their chances, they will get over that line eventually.
Like, you don't, like, I might just say, like, they're not, you don't want to blame anyone, but if you think about the two big games Tipp lost this year against Galway last Sunday in the league semi-final, both were probably decided on goalkeeping errors, and that's nothing against Caoimhe Burke and nothing against Anya Slattery. Anya let one through her hand against Kilkenny, which allowed Kilkenny come back into the match when Tipp had it, and then last weekend I think it was 12-11 when the goal went in, or 12-10. If that goal hadn't gone in, there were still probably 4, 5, 6 minutes where maybe Tipp could have got a couple of points maybe and at least got it into extra time. So it just shows you at the highest level of any sport, mistakes are going to cost you. And unfortunately, twice this year in the big games that matter for Tipp, that's ultimately what came against them. Like, but I'm sure Caoimhe and Anya will be all the better for that. Like, if they'll be tough, they'll come back and they'll be better goalkeepers for that experience.
Yeah, without doubt. We'll bring in Thomas Conway now as we move on to talking about the Tipperary ladies footballers who had a 7-10 to 3-16 win over Tyrone. Your thoughts on that, Thomas? I mean, obviously a victory that Declan Carr badly needed, and obviously without a couple of players too who were with the Camogie team.
Yeah, it was astonishing, really. I mean, it was fantastic. I've been covering the ladies footballers all year, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it despite, you know, the string of defeats which they suffered. But, you know, I think, like I think I said it in the piece in the paper this week, it was kind of almost a sense of validation you could feel afterwards, because, you know, this Tipp team obviously have shown in, you know, flashes and glimpses all year that they can play, and they can play a real kind of firepower attacking brand of football, counter attacks. They've huge pace in the team, even in the absence of you know, key players like Aisling Maloney and Emma Morrissey. And, you know, they've demonstrated that, you know, in brief periods throughout the year. But I think, you know, Saturday was kind of the culmination of everything just kind of fused and seemed to come together. And it was something Declan Carr pointed to and emphasised after the game. And what was particularly impressive, like, I mean, the 7 goals are obviously the most eye-catching aspect. And they were brilliantly worked goals. They were all kind of, you know, they illustrated, you know, how threatening Tipp could be on the front foot and their level of support play. Because a lot of the goals ended up being fisted in, which I thought was telling, or palmed in, because it illustrated that, you know, there was always a player in support. You know, the moves were carefully orchestrated, training ground moves, almost, you know, straight off the training pitch. But the defensive composure was another thing. I mean, they withstood at times, you know, a really potent Tyrone attack. Niamh O'Neill, who's their kind of marquee forward, is a fabulous footballer. She's she kicks some beautiful points. She's a beautiful striker of the ball. You know, and Tyrone are a good team. Like, I mean, you know, defensively they kind of they fragmented, they fell apart, but they'll actually, I felt sorry for them because, well, It was hard for Ireland on Saturday now, given the events later in the day. But they're not a bad team. And the fact that Tipp put 7 goals past them was more, I think, evidence of Tipp's attacking threat than it was Tyrone's frailties. So no, it was an enjoyable afternoon.
Yeah, Shane, what do you think? Like 1-7 for Ashley McCarthy on a return. Marie Creedon scored a couple of goals, so did Roisin Daly. People pitching in from all areas.
Yeah, they did. I suppose you don't I was just so thrilled for that group, because they've never been able to put their best team in the field all year. Just as when maybe somebody, Arla Dwyer and Ashley McCarthy were coming back then. Ashley Maloney and Emma Morrissey went down, and then you're coming up to the Kerry game, the first relegation match. And then the 2 Kennedy sisters go down injured, and you're like, where the hell? And then, just to pull out that result is incredible. And I just think it's so important, because if they went down, it was going to be such a wasted year next year, because if Tipperary got their entire panel back next year, they were probably going to walk the intermediate championship. And that's not, because they're just so talented. But look, they get to come back next year. I'm sure when Declan Carr gets that group together, January, February next year, gets them all together, and you think that, okay, the players were missing, but they've managed to stay up while blooding about 5 or 6 or 7 maybe players that at the start of the year probably wouldn't have seen an awful lot of game time in the big matches. They're all blooded now, so you'd like to think maybe Tipp would have a very strong panel next year, hopefully, to that if they're able to pull their best 15, best 16, 17 on the field, that they will be. I wouldn't say they might. I won't say it goes far to say they'll do a mead on it to get straight to an All Ireland, but I'd like to think next year, with a full team, they could definitely get to the knockout stages.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Paul, if you've seen much.
Yeah, the full team thing is interesting, actually, Shane, because I think the AFLW over there season, well, it was supposed to change. It was supposed to start a bit earlier, so the girls won't have to go over a bit earlier now with COVID kicking off in a big way over there. It might change things. So that might be an issue, I suppose. If you have all the best players are there, it definitely makes things 100 times easier. But if they're not, obviously Tipperary maybe don't have the another Orla Dwyer in the wing. But I thought it was interesting as well that they picked, or that Orla in particular picked the Camogie over the football. Now I suppose they knew in advance that maybe they'd get through the football slightly easier, and having Ashley McCarthy made that easier. But I just thought it was interesting that was decided on. I know the Camogie was an All-Ireland semi-final as well, but I wonder, was there much said about that, Thomas, at the game or anything like that, or was that kind of expected?
Yeah, I kind of, I didn't pry on it, or I didn't kind of interrogate that. I wouldn't say, I came in with relatively kind of low expectations. I didn't really expect Tipp to win this game, and it's not that I don't have confidence on them. So the fact that, they were missing Orla and Roisin Howard, that is, I mean, I saw that as a major blow. But Ashley McCarthy really did step up and fill the void. I mean, she was just, her athleticism and, her judgment is just, it's out of this world. She elevates the players around her as well, which I think is important to consider, because, often when we think of the loss of key players, like Ashley McCarthy or Maloney, we think of them in an isolated way. But really, there's more to it than that, because it allows you to construct a game plan, and the players around you, or the players around them, will feed off that. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't think, I think it's a very difficult position for the likes of Orla and Roisin. I mean, being a dual star in these times, or a treble star when you consider the Aussie rules, it's a difficult one, and they were probably disappointed that she didn't play, but I think there was kind of a sense of understanding there as well. As Enda said, and you were at the Camogie as well, this was a big Camogie game. This was seen as Tipp could potentially break the mold. So that was probably what swayed her ultimately.
Yeah, and any thoughts on that before we move on to club?
Yeah, just one performance can colour a year, can't it? They've had just such a terrible year with results, and just the positivity around after just keeping up in senior. And as Shane was saying, with so many players missing, it is an achievement in itself, with so many young players coming in and making a difference. So it's great for them to stay up senior. It's not another year lost on the intermediate grade, and they can have a good crack next year with everybody back. Yeah,
absolutely. Shane, then to move on to the county championship, a bit of a rip-roaring game to get it going, which is a repeat of last year's county final. So Killadangan beating Lockmore 223 to 222. I'd say Lockmore are loving Kildangan at this stage.
Oh, stop! Like it was, it was. Like I don't. It probably wasn't in terms of quality. Probably just slightly off last year's final. I think maybe the last 10 or 15 minutes maybe coloured it. It was a bit like some good scores in probably a little. I suppose first round championship you wouldn't be too sure. Maybe there was a Kildangan and Lockmore probably a bit leggy after the mid final or the divisional finals the previous Sunday. But like that last 15 minutes was super. And every time you thought Kildangan were going to get 3 or 4 points ahead, Lockmore came back, got a couple of goals, and probably a draw would have been a fair result. But look, it just shows you Kildangan. This is the third game in a row between North Championship and that they've managed to get the last score of the game, the last scores to go ahead and win the match. So it just shows you the winning mentality to have is incredible. Like so, look, I'm sure they'll feel a little sore in Lockmore this week, but it was a great way to start off the championship. I know it was. Like to get I suppose it worked out at last year's final pairing was drawn first up, hopefully it sets us up for another brilliant championship.
Paul, you were at Toom Holy Cross in Nina Killarwan, but Kildangan are starting off the way they're continuing on the way they went last year.
Yeah, the danging or banging apparently is what the locals are saying. Yeah, they're flying it. In fairness, both their teams I think are flying it. But yeah, geez, Dan O'Mara with the goals and Sean Hayes. Like I've been watching Sean Hayes since minor when he was playing with Tipp, and he's just a goal machine, isn't he? He got 6-7 that year in 2018 when he was playing minor with Tipp. He got the Munster Player of the Year then, but he's just class. He got another goal there again on Friday night. But they've Dan O'Mara, of course, the flair player that he is, bringing the form from last year, and they're unstoppable at the moment. It's the way they just kind of came there. 12 seconds or so, I think, was all that was left in the game when Alan Flynn got that point. Yeah, but they're looking good. They're going as well as they finished last year, aren't they?
Yeah, and Alan Flynn was very prominent in that game, Thomas. Like they do have dangers in all areas if you're the opposition.
Oh yeah, I mean I think they're undeniable favourites for to retain the county title. I listened to it on the radio. It was exhilarating stuff, really. And probably evidence the quality of both sides. I mean, you wouldn't put it past the two of them to again feature in a county final potentially, even though it's a tough enough group, and Lockmore now have are slightly behind because of that loss. But yeah, I think Kildangan, to pick up on what Paul said there, their strength and depth is amazing. I mean, they won their Seamus O'Reen game at the weekend as well, and it's not implausible that they could feature or pick up two county titles, the Seamus O'Reen and the Dan Breen this year. So I mean, I think they're obviously the team to beat. I wonder, I mean, like, you can, all teams will, have off days, and, there are plenty of others there that will be targeting Kildangan. So it'll be interesting to see, can they sustain that kind of momentum? But certainly the nature of the victory on Friday night gives them some serious kind of motivation and momentum going forward.
It's a great thing for a team to know, Shane, that they can win tight games. Like that would have been a problem for the likes of, the Cork hurlers for a number of years. They're just losing tight games after tight games. And if you're a team that knows that when it gets into the heat of battle, the Dublin Footballer has been another great example there for a decade. Like Kildangan, they're in a position now where they probably feel like no matter what happens, we saw it against Killarwan, we saw it against Lockmore, that they're going to be able to see it out.
Oh, definitely. And I suppose the one thing about it is their composure. Like they were probably one of the, maybe along with Thurles, one of the first clubs in Tipp really to transition into sort of, I wouldn't say possession, but like they were always looking for, there was all their players are comfortable on the ball, like, and the players are always making themselves available. You see other clubs where lads will get involved when the ball comes in their direction, but the Kildangan guys are always trying to drift into space. If there's a pocket of space, somebody's going to drift into it. It's a positive mindset, and look, there's no doubt about it. Like they're going to be hard to beat with that mindset. And then, as Paul said earlier, like Sean Hayes, I suppose through all these club matches, we're going to be looking at potentially maybe guys that and the prospective Tipp manager look at, and like while Sean is only 20, I definitely think he's a brilliant ability to get goals. He finished past Aidan McGrath for the second goal last week was brilliant, like right in the top corner. Like his first intention anytime is goals. Probably he's a more development to do. Maybe his work rate and stuff like that can get better. But I would have noticed this year there's a more maturity in his hurling. The work rate has risen. It will look. The older he gets, the more mature he gets. That work rate is going to climb again. But definitely, there's definitely a very high ceiling in that guy if he still says progressing the way he is.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's seen what match because obviously there's so many on. It's hard to keep on top of all of them. But I might throw it to you, Shane, first, and maybe if the other lads have seen it also, that they might chime in. Just curious, how did we know John Maher had a baptism of fire when he came in against Limerick in the Munster Championship last winter. How did he go? Did John McGrath show flashes? How did Noel McGrath play? Shane, if you just want to start it out.
Yeah, I think John had a very strong first half. Probably in the second half not as prominent, but he definitely in the first half it looked like the old John McGrath was back, and I think that was great to see. Like Noel, probably not as prominent. John Maher looked busy. I thought Kieran Connolly we commanded very well. Tommy Maher would be a new name for me. I wouldn't have remembered the name coming up underage, but he looks like he's a bit of mobility and a bit of size about him. So look, it's a tough one for Lockmore, but probably in a group with Brackens and Mike Carkey, like they would be favoured to win those two matches, finish second in the group, and get back to the county quarter final. So I wouldn't write them off by any means.
Yeah, lads.
Yeah, I mean, like I think Lockmore always, and the fact that they marry the hurling with the football as well. I mean, I think every year because of that, there's probably a concern relating to fatigue and that, but they seem to manage it. They seem to manage it superbly. It'll be very interesting to see. Like I do, I always like the brand of hurling Lockmore play. I maybe have a few questions, right? Do they have kind of the pace and explosiveness? And maybe they do. Obviously, I didn't see the game on Friday night. I was listening to it. So I'll be able to say more once I actually see them in action. But certainly when you have big game players like the likes of Noel McGrath, John, who have proven it in the past, and okay, they'll be hurt by the defeat on Friday, and similarly last September. But they're also a team who knows how to grind it out, and because they've won titles in the past, will believe in any circumstance. Like you contrast the likes of Killanangan and Nina and Lockmore to maybe Nina, who will enter a county final because of their past experience. Almost a hoodoo has evolved. And I'm not saying they're not capable of winning it, but it's kind of an extra psychological barrier to overcome. I don't think Lockmore have that, so it puts them in a good place.
Paul?
Well, John McGrath was the player who stood out for me, really, especially in the first half of Shane. So I thought his kind of distribution, as well as we expect John to score, and maybe his pace, some people questioned the odd time as well, but it didn't seem to be a factor, especially in the first half. He's just got a great, I'm not saying that new, but any of McGrath's here, everyone knows they're well able to pick a pass, but I think it was very evident in the first half. And Thomas, as I have you're saying you didn't see it, and not to do a big plug for the streaming service, but of course, if you log on there to tipperaryga.ie, you can sign up for the year pass in those games, or you're able to look back and watch them again. If we're whetting people's appetite here, it's as good a time to plug it as any, I suppose.
Yeah.
And John McGrath's only 27. I mean, he hasn't even, you could argue he's just about entering his prime now. So, definitely there's plenty more to come from him. Paul, you were at the Killarwan and Nina Aero game. Can you talk to us about Killarwan's performance?
Yeah, it was a strange kind of game. Like it had everything, I suppose. They were both a bit slow to get going. They were both looked a bit nervous. There was a few maybe changes towards the end. Like there's one or two things I suppose that were notable. Killarwan finished the game with 5 different free takers, which is not something you see very often, and something that we were kind of taken aback by. They were the better team throughout the whole game, but they still let Nina back into it. Like they were 8 points up, I think, with 3 or 4 minutes to go, and Nina got 2 late goals. Like from a positive point of view, like did a good few players who put in huge performances. Keane Darcy he had 14 in his back, started a full forward, even though he was all over the field. He finished with 5 points from play, as far as I know. He was all over the place. Jerry Cahill was brilliant as well. So and Keane O'Kelly obviously got a great goal, which maybe put it to bed in some ways. I know Nina did come back at it, but there was lots of great performance, lots of positives, but then a few maybe slight inconsistencies that they try to iron out as teams as the championship goes on. Overall, they did win, maybe not by as much as they'd like, but they have the points in the bag and they move on to the next game. From the Nina perspective, then, I suppose 5 of their 6 starting forwards scored, which is always a positive. Paddy Murphy, the only one who didn't score, and he did plenty of work off the ball and things like that. Jake Morris on the frees took a while to get into it. He eventually did finish the game with 6 frees, and he got one from play. His brother Pierce in centre got one of them goals I was talking about at the end. So they did finish strong. The 2 Heffernans obviously in the corners, and Anthony Walsh full forward did bits and pieces. I'd say they'll be a bit disappointed if they'd nearly played how they played in the last 3 or 4 minutes for the whole game. Who knows what could have happened. And Barry Heffernan went on one lung-bursting run at the very end. He was playing full back. He was on Seamus Hennessy, and they both kind of cancelled each other out to a large extent. But at one stage towards the end, when they were a few points down, he more or less said, geez, lads, I'm going for this. And he got in the ball from full back, did 2 or 3 1-2s, and ended up in the centre forward position. And if they could consider moving him a bit further out the field, maybe playing him in centre back in the next couple of rounds. But yeah, there's still plenty of potential there. Obviously, it's Nina, and obviously they're going to be one of the contenders come the end of the championship. But Kilruane were probably deserving winners, but they still have a lot to work on. That's probably what I'd say.
Shane, this full back thing now very much interests me. We know it's arguably the most athletically demanding position in the field in terms of like you're often going to be isolated against maybe the fastest, sharpest hurler of the opposition. There's going to be nothing but space around you, and good ball going in is definitely the intention. So you have to be a fast full back, you have to be strong, you have to be good in the air, you kind of have to be everything. And we saw that Niall O'Mara played there last week again for Kilruane against Kildangan in the North final, and yeah, he played brilliantly, but you feel like you're losing something out the field. And then like Barry Heffernan playing full back, like a guy like that can cover so much ground. Obviously they have him back there for a reason, but they're surely losing a lot by having him back there.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And in fairness, like I haven't been able to, I have the time to watch the Kilruane Nina game back yet, but Paul, with Niall O'Mara played in the half back line on Sunday. What did against Nina? I assume. Like that was my read of the match report that he was probably centre back for most of that game.
Yeah, he had 5 in his back, but he was centre back. Yeah.
Like in fairness to Kilruane, they went horses for courses with Niall O'Mara against Kildangan, and then different for Nina. That's why I thought. Look, I for coming back to Nina, I think Barry's wasted a full back for Nina. He's so much value for Nina out in the half back line, and I think long term Nina are going to have to go down that road. And look, if you're going horses for courses, like you think, like Seamus Hennessy, while he's big and strong, he's not going to kill you for pace. So you probably think maybe an Adam Grattan or a Conor Ryan might have been able to go with Seamus Hennessy last weekend. You could have released Barry Heffernan out to the half back line where he could have maybe offered more athleticism, maybe read some of the play a little bit better, like so. And as Paul said, break forward, maybe take up on solo runs, maybe slip a pop pass to somebody to stick over a long range point or two, like so. I definitely think it's something Brian Horgan will have to think about going forward. Like you'd probably think they'll probably will have enough to beat Ross Gray, but Nina are going to have to beat Borrisoleigh in the third group match to have any chance of reaching the quarterfinals. And okay, they're probably more suited to playing Borrisoleigh, because Borrisoleigh are more of a hurling team. You play Kilruane, they're a good hurling team, but they get in your face. They're a real traditional. Kilruane they really hound you. Like there's nothing flash with Kilruane. They just get after you. You try and win your own ball, and that's the sort of matches Nina have always tended to struggle in the last few years. Maybe when the likes of Lochmore, and we saw Clonulty Rossmore in the county final, they tend to struggle against those sort of maybe rural teams that give that little bit extra. Maybe we all see Nina maybe likes of. They've always seemed to have had Turles Arsfield's number when Turles were going well, but then when it came to maybe other teams, they tended to maybe have a bit more difficulty. So that's why I think maybe against Ross Gray and even Borrisoleigh to a lesser extent, they would probably feel that they have the hurling and maybe they match up better against those sort of teams.
Yeah, and to move on to Borrisoleigh now, obviously a 224 to 15 point win over Ross Gray. Thomas, do you put Borrisoleigh back in the conversation for a county title?
Oh yeah, I don't think they ever left it. Even though maybe I was guilty of saying that previously. But I mean, again, it's the wealth of experience they have, and those younger players whom we saw kind of thriving 2 years ago, you know, and that incredible run, you know, they're kind of starting to come to maturity now. Would probably have physically developed a little bit more, and that gives, you know, I think Bursley have kind of an optimal blend of that kind of experience and youth at the moment. Now it'll be very interesting to see. Like, they're also a team who, you know, they strike me as a clever team, you know, who can kind of adapt their brand of hurling to you know, suit the circumstances, which is something I think saw during that run in 2019. So I definitely think that, you know, they'll be around at the latter stages of the championship, you know, capable of overcoming Kildangan, or capable of causing an upset. Like, certainly you write them off at your pearl.
Yeah, Shane, you had Kevin Maher as man of the match. He played midfield here. We saw him at centre back for the under 20s a month or so ago. But Burris have rejigged the team. It's not the same. It's not the exact same sort of look that we would have seen in the past couple of years.
No, and I suppose, look, there was definitely an element of, like, I wouldn't say they didn't set out to win an Art Championship, but I know I'd say the main priority was to blood players and maybe not rush Brendan Maher back from his ankle injury, or if any had a niggle, they weren't going to put them out there. But last Saturday in Moneygall, we saw Boris at their best 15 playing together, and it was an interesting one. Like you had Seamus Burke, Liam Ryan, and Kieran Maher in full back line. Very, very quick guys, very good ball players, and they did well. Half back line, your own brother Paddy, then Dan McCormick at 6 and Ray at 7. Like, we all know Dan is more or less played as a de facto centre back for in the year they got to the Club All Ireland, but definitely playing him there as a full time centre back and allowing Brendan up the field more, I guess, dropping out as from centre forward and more or less allowing to go where he wants. I just thought it was an interesting element to it, and I just thought him and Kevin Maher dovetailed off each other brilliantly. I suppose in some ways Brendan maybe was man of the match. Like, he got some brilliant scores, but like some of them were passed to him by Kevin Maher. I just thought, for a young guy, his vision, his awareness, Kevin, was so good. And like, him along with Ray McCormick from that game would be two. You think, okay, prospective Tipp manager, have a look at these two. Because look, I think Ray be sort of I wouldn't say maybe a bit of a Callum Lyons in him. Like, there's a raw physicality to him, but there's a good hurler, and he's got physically very strong. And look, Kevin played at centre back for the Tipp 20s this year, but it's not his natural position. I think midfield, they're popping up. His vision is very, very good. And you say you had Brendan there, and you have a forward line that now contains Eddie Ryan, who very, very mature for an 18-year-old. Like, you still have the two Kennedy brothers there. You have Devaney, who got a brilliant goal. Like, just one of those, like the
flick over the defender.
Yeah, like brilliant goal. Like, and like I think Devaney is just going to be one of those players. He's going to frustrate you because he's going to be quiet one day, but yet the next day he could come out and score a goal in 6 or 7 points. He has brilliant natural ability, but he's still very young. Like, you think as he matures, we're probably going to see more consistency out of him. But I definitely think Boris Lee's first 15 is a match for the best starting 15 of any club in the county, over Kildangan and Sarsfields and not more.
Strikes right up towards JD. JD being pursued by Glenn McNabb, but JD managed to catch the hopping ball off the ground. Now he's showing his pace that we all know he has. JD squares the ball. JD is in for brilliant goal. JD.
Yeah, I just happened to have that goal available to us there, so I said the Burris man in me says I better play that when I can. Paul, I know you've obviously seen other games as well this weekend, but where are Burris in the pecking order for you?
They'd have to be up there. They'd have to be in the top 3 or 4 anyway, wouldn't they? And I was going to ask Shane there when I saw Eddie Ryan's name. I was like, that's not one I'd be more, I suppose, that familiar with, and that full forward line in general. I know yourself, Shane, the Boris Lee contingent there, you were kind of saying there was a lot of talk last year that the balls had just been bombed in on top of the Kennys inside there. I was wondering, has that style kind of changed this year, or how are they doing it?
From what I'd seen this year, there's a definite change. Like Connor,
it had to, didn't it?
They're more or less playing the two Kennys as wing forwards now in a lot of the games this year. Like, I'd say they want to try and get away from that maybe main option of maybe going into Niall at full forward. I'd say like they played JD Devaney and Niall Eddie Ryan as a two-man full forward line against Borris So I'd say they're trying to be a little more flexible. That look, if needs be, they can shove Connor or Niall Kenny at full forward and bomb the ball in on top of them. But it does look like they're maybe moving away from that as their plan A. But it's a very, very good plan B to fall back on if you're in difficulty.
Yeah. What about Alan Tynan? A quick word on him, Shane.
Yeah, I thought he was decent. Like, I suppose it's difficult maybe in a team that probably were playing second fiddle a lot of the game, but he couple of nice touches there. Just probably not easy in a well-beaten team, but you could definitely see there was something more about him than maybe on other players that maybe in the Ross Gray team. Look, it was a bad day at the office of Ross Gray that you just never. Like they had an awful lot of ball coming out of defence, but what they were sending into the forwards was very, very poor. Like it just didn't. They worked the ball out to a certain distance, but then they looked up and maybe there wasn't enough lateral movement, and there was guys not able to shift to maybe get a run on their men and get off them and to get an easy pass. Like so, look, it's like Ross Gray have they've Nina next and Kilruane to play, so like they'll be up against it to avoid the relegation playoffs.
We'll jump over to the Seamus O'Reen for a minute. Thomas, you were at Gurnahoe Glengool against Ballina, 415 to 120. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I suppose as a Ballina native, it was an underwhelming performance from their perspective. But equally, Gurnahoe were very good. They surprised me actually because they play a really, really clever brand of hurling. They kind of almost Gaelic football-esque strategy in that they really press high from the half-back line, and their half-back line is their platform. I gave man the match to Brian Maher, who was wing-back, and really you could have picked any of that line, but they're also well able to shoot from distance, and they're accurate from distance. They hit a number of long-range points, which were really impressive, and I think they kind of Ballina look kind of stultified, or they looked, almost paralysed. Like David Kelly was their best player, and it's interesting, Ballina seem to have that same dilemma now that you mentioned with Nina around full back. They started him in full back, and he was good, but he was isolated. And in the second half, they brought on Tom Collins, who would be, quite an experienced, seasoned defender, and he kind of anchored the back line, and that allowed David to get forward. So, I wonder, is there a role that he could kind of operate almost as a sweeper, just kind of in front of the full back line, just to afford him that opportunity to get forward, because he's really powerful on the front foot. And I think that's the game plan which Ballina are trying to develop. And it's certainly kind of the game plan which Gurnahoe have. They play, as well as taking scores from distance, they have, strength and depth in the forward line, and they kind of play almost, they play at angles, they get the ball in the half back line and they'll spray it. They don't tend to go direct a whole lot of the time, even though Ronan Tian, was centre forward, and he was exceptionally good as well. So, they have a lot of pace, a lot of kind of finesse, and I would see them an ability to score goals then as well, which is crucial. I would rate them highly based on that performance on Sunday.
We'll circle back to the senior championship in a minute, but a couple of the other games in the Seamus O'Reen you did see, Shane, one of which was St. Mary's beating Lara 123 to 120, and you also saw Killadangan B beat Burgess by 16 points to 14, which is fairly good going. Yeah,
I suppose in terms of quality, the games you mentioned, like, were probably chalk and cheese. I thought Laura St. Mary's game was a very, very good game, very high standard match. St. Mary's deservedly won the game. They just did that little bit more throughout, and I suppose Seamus Kennedy, the county man, was the difference, like 6 points in play. And while he was named at number 14, and he did start at 14, he was given a free role more or less by St. Mary's to go anywhere where he wanted. Like, and it wasn't as if he was centre forward for a spell, he was midfield for a spell, he was back in the half back line. He was just St. Mary's man more or less said, wherever you feel you're needed, you go. And it sort of left Laura in a quandary. So like, if you went to man marking him, you were sort of man marking him even back 40 yards from your own goal. So it Laura more or less had to go zonal, but then nobody they sort of got confused. Like, if you leave your own man, but then you nearly have to go to Kennedy, and whatever about somebody else, Kennedy was their best player. Like, he was super, and even towards the end, I know when Doro were trying to pilfer a goal to get a draw, like under the old rules of Kennedy, Mohan McIntyre was going through and Kennedy just grabbed him by the jersey and yanked him down. And like, if it was only a yellow card, like under inter-county, he would have gotten a yellow card for a 10 minutes in bin. But look, within the rules, it was the right thing to do, because there was a half chance of a Lura goal if you didn't do it. Like, because you'd like to think, look, Kennedy on the one hand, if Lura without Bonner Maher this year, like, and he's a huge loss to the team. If Bonner plays, he might be worth the 3 or 4 points that maybe would have got Lura a draw or maybe snuck a win. Like, so, look, Lura, I suppose you think Lura lost their first game last year in the championship and they still got all the way to the final. So look, they know the road they have to get back to. They play Portrue next, who lost to Cashel. Like that, I suppose that group is probably the toughest group in the Oreen Cup. As like, you have some very strong teams in it. Like Cashel got past Port by 4 points. There's 3 red cards in the game, so a bit of a spicy affair. But I think that Cashel St Mary's game will be very interesting the next day. I think we've been waiting to see St Mary's come with those back-to-back minor A championships, 2015 and 2016. They probably should be maturing around now. So like both those teams are on the front foot. You go to Burgess Killadangan, like it was, I didn't think it was a hectic game in terms of standard. And I suppose, look, Killadangan deservedly won it, but like Burgess hit 18 wides. They were really, I thought, there probably was, maybe they came under pressure expecting that, okay, we're playing a second team, we should be winning it. And the longer the match went on, maybe you saw players get a little nervous, a little anxious. God, why isn't it working out? And look, they were 6 points down with 10 minutes to go. And look, they got it back to 4, but like Killadangan just ground it out. And like, that was a very satisfying win for Killadangan, because like even over the years, maybe at junior and intermediate, like they would have been great rivals. And even in the early years when both teams come up to senior in the late noughties, and now not only have you Burgess losing to Killadangan's first team, you have them losing to their second team, and that's going to hurt. Like it's you're losing to the second team of another of a club who are your neighbours, and probably arguably maybe your greatest rivals, maybe the last 20, 30 years. Like that's a sore one. And look, I did say in my report, like if Burgess play like that again, they could be looking at another relegation. Like, but they really need to get Stephen Murray fit. Like we would have seen over the years how important Stephen Murray was to their scoring, and when he wasn't on the field, they looked rather toothless up front. And like they brought him on with 10 minutes to go, but you could see his hamstring is not right. He knocked over a few frees, and I think his presence galvanised everybody else when he came on. But his mobility, even in, you think the 2 weeks to the Carrick Swan game, the next game, it's hard to see him being right. Like he might just have to limp through matches, and just like his free taking is unbelievable. Like, and that they might just have to maybe risk and reward with him now going forward. But it's no doubt a great win for Killadangan B.
Yeah, we'll jump back up to the Dan Breen, because Paul, you were at I think you were at the Toomevara Holy Cross game, and the final score 220 to Toomevara, 215 to Holy Cross.
Which actually makes it sound like it was probably a bit closer than in reality it was. I think Toom were kind of on top for the whole game, and similar to the game I was just telling you about in Toomevara on the Sunday. Toomevara themselves let Holy Cross back into it a little bit towards the end. Like they were on top the whole way through the game. They got a couple of goals when they needed them. Darren Delaney got Toom's second one there, and that put him 2-11 to 5 points up after 36 minutes. So that was 12-point lead. So the game looked all over and done with then at that stage. But then they came back and they conceded the 2 goals, and it was actually down to 2 with 2 minutes to go. And then Flanagan actually got that point to bring it into 2 minutes. Stephen Flanagan, the corner forward there for Holy Cross Ballycahill, got an unbelievable point. Actually, to check it out on my Twitter if you get a chance. He took a flick, swivel, and put it over the bar. It was actually fantastic score, one of the scores of the weekend in my opinion. But that brought it back to 2 when it looked like Holy Cross were dead and buried. I suppose the big thing with Holy Cross at the moment, and I think he talked about it last week, is poor Brian O'Mara doing the hand injury again. And he was such a hole. That number 6 position then had to be filled by Cathal Barrett. And it was, as you kind of expect, when Cathal Barrett was playing in the defence, the Holy Cross looked good in the defence and good and strong. But then they'd no one in the forwards. Then he'd go up to the forwards and he got a score. And then things in the back line would maybe not be as strong as they were when he was there. So that was a bit difficult. But Toomevara had a nice little kind of axes going on up front as well. They had Alan Ryan was kind of out in front. There's the score now, yeah.
That was a wicked score, like, so.
The turn, he robbed it, flicked it, and then turned. And he was a turn their side. Like, he might be small in stature, but he was a huge turn in their side the whole way through the game. It just unfortunately came out the wrong side. But the Tumivara kind of axis of evil, we'll call it, was Darren Delaney at centre forward was kind of outbreaking ball, laying it off to Alan Ryan, and he was more than likely hand passing it off, I should say, into David Young, for example, for his goal in the first half, came kind of from that axis. And when they were playing well, they were very good. And then they just seemed to kind of take their foot off the gas now and again and let Holy Cross back into it. And as you said there, the score was 5 points or so in the end, but it probably should have been a little bit more if they had kind of just kept the intensity up for the full 60. When I was talking to Owen Brisland, the manager, after, he kind of said more or less the same thing. He was like, it's great to get the win, but there's a lot to work on again for round 2.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Toom and Holy Cross, Thomas? I noticed Cathal Barrett playing in the forward line.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking at both teams here and how they lined up. I mean, I think for clubs like Toom and Holy Cross, where maybe they're not as star-studded as the likes of, we'll say, your Ninas and maybe your Kildangan, I think it's really important that they kind of play the channels in the sense that, you know, you mentioned there, Paul, David Young was kind of anchoring them at full forward, or that was kind of the direct target every time. I do think with, you know, for Toom, it's the likes of, I think, was Jack Delaney in corner forward, or certainly that's what it says in the starting team. You know, it's crucial that they utilise them and that they have those players so that they have options when they get the ball in the half back line. They can spray the ball down the channels rather than, we'll say, you know, up for the direct route the whole time. You know, it's all very well when David Young gets on top of his man, and he's an excellent hurler. Don't get me wrong. But what happens then when you have the likes of maybe Barry Heffernan there, who's, you know, incredibly experienced and is very good to deal with those kind of situations. So that's why I think you need to be utilising your wing and corner forwards. It's interesting in Cathal Barrett. He seems to be an incredibly versatile player. You know, when you recall, you know, cornerback when he first came on the scene. But he really has shown that he can operate in all sectors of the field, really. I mean, I wonder would an over-reliance on him be an issue? But then at the same time, when you have that kind of a player with that kind of versatility, it can come in very useful in the sense that you can employ him more or less anywhere. A little bit like Brendan Maher with Bursley, or, you know, there's numerous examples, really. Michael Breen with Ballina even. You know, he can be deployed in whatever area of the field that he's needed. So I'll be interested to see how he gets on in the forward line. But Holy Cross immediately now are starting 2 points behind, and, you know, their next game is a do or die clash. So, you know, things are going to have to come right pretty quickly.
Yeah,
just to come in and Tumivara, sorry, cut across you, Shane, just in 2 seconds to kind of address what you were saying there, Thomas, about the forwards and stuff. Their actual full back line, Josh McCarthy was at number 2, he got 2 points. Colin Canning was wing back, he got 3, and Jason Ryan was at 7 and he got 1. So that's they have scored. They had 11 different scorers, believe it or not. Like, so they do have a great spread of scorers, and I'd say that is something that Brisland will be delighted about. That was something that I forgot to mention there when I was talking about. I thought that was very impressive.
Yeah, very good point. So then just to kind of round up the last of the fixtures before we touch on Thurles against Drum. Clonolty Rossmore, they beat Mullinahone, so that means Mullinahone will play Holy Cross the next day. Clonolty will be against Tumivara. JK Brackens beat Mycarkey Burris 116-113. That they're in the same group as Kildangan and Lockmore. Aero Gannacarty just about saw off Upper Church Drumban 18 points to 17. And the final game we'll talk about, Thurles Sarsfields 519, Drummond 123. There's a fair difference in the scoreline there for a finish. I know obviously Drum got more points on the board there, but what are your thoughts on that? And just, you know, Seamus Callan obviously didn't look fully right during the season. How did he perform in this game, Shane? I'm not even sure if you saw the entire game now. So
I didn't see her much. I was actually driving to Moneygall, and I turned on the radio, and I think Thurles got a goal within the first minute, and then I switched over the channel to get some of the commentary on Mayo Kerry and Tyrone, and I turned it back 5 minutes later, and I think it was a 3-5 to 3 points to draw. Jesus, what's going on here? Thurles are absolutely on fire at the moment. You probably say they're definitely the team of the championship so far, but like you'd maybe, if you were Thurles, maybe you'd be a little worried to say if you're going well now, will you be going well in October, November when the knockout stages are coming? So look, I think Thurles after last year needed to hit the ground running, and they're doing that. Look, they've got, I suppose, Paddy Creedon scoring a hat trick of goals. Like he's a new player to their team now this year. Like, and look, we saw him for the Tipp 20s this year. I suppose he didn't set the world on fire, but maybe in the setup they didn't play to his strengths. Whereas you over Thurles Sarsfield, it's all ball play. It's all about, a lot like Killidangan and maybe Burris Lee. When the ball is coming out of defence, if you're a forward, you nearly know what way it's coming into you. You nearly know what way you're going to move. And look, when you have a big physical presence like Dennis Maher in beside you, a young player like Paddy Creedon, if he gets the ball and he has the power and physique to break tackles and stick it in the back of the net. So look, it was a brilliant start for Thurles. I suppose, look, like the scoreline was so bad in the first half. You said, God Almighty, this could be an awful loss for Drum. But look, they came back. Like they scored 123, which would win a lot of matches. Like so, look, they'll take something from that. And look, it sets up a brilliant game with Upperchurch and Drum the next day. Like you think the loser of that game cannot make the quarterfinals, so it's knockout for either of those. Was particularly for Upperchurch because they've lost the head-to-head against Anarcarty and they have Thurles to come. Like so, like they really have to win this. You would have, so I think I know they've had injuries in Drum this year, but I think Woodlock will have been very, very pleased with maybe the manner that they didn't give up. But like it's going to be a tough campaign because like we've seen Seamus Callan, and maybe as the year goes on, he will get better and get sharper. But we probably didn't see that with Tipp. We always thought maybe extra games will go by, he'll get better. But I don't think we saw that. And it's going to be. We saw probably in last year's county semi-final, like when he was quiet, they tended to struggle. Like, but I wouldn't rule out Drum yet. You probably think Drum would fancy their chances of beating Upperchurch and Annacarty maybe to finish second. So I don't think they'll be too. They probably will be glad the way maybe the second half worked out, but like they can't be conceding the goals they were. And to think that they definitely wouldn't beat Upperchurch or Annacarty doing that again.
Yeah, Paul, are Sars peaking too early?
I don't know. They look like they can play it any way they want. Is from what you've seen. Like they can obviously go through the lines. They have lovely hurlers, and then they just, if they're in trouble, blast it up to the Twin Towers as they're being called again. Dennis Maher and Paddy Creedon they can do what they want. Like, and Creedon on the fifth goal, if you get a chance to look at it, he shows he's not just a catch and blasted merchant. Like he picked up the ball, ran 40, 50 yards and smacked it into the back of the net. But as Shane was saying there, I think the game was over after about 10 minutes. It was 3-5 to 3 points. And it's hard to, I suppose, take too much more out of that. But them two lads, they're going to take stopping this year there. But maybe it's too early, round one. Who knows what's going to happen?
Like that Billy McCarthy to come back, we haven't seen him yet. Like, and by all accounts, I think they're playing even with Tipperary. They're making sure he's going to be fully right before he comes back this time to make sure he doesn't break down again. So, like, and you think, look, they're Thurles' second team easily beat the Swan in the Oreen Cup. So you think maybe Billy McCarthy could be started on that team just to build himself up. They don't have to even throw him back into the A team as well. Like they don't have to throw him back in too early, like so they can build him up slowly if they needed to through their second team. Who will you're looking at that score? You think they'll be thereabouts in the knockout stages of the Oreen as well.
And a special mention to Sean Ryan, who scored 4 goals for Templederry in their 520 to 117 win over Newport. That's not bad going at all either. So I think what's that?
Just come in there briefly, Shane. I'm just thinking, what are the prospects that we'll see a Thurles Killidangan senior hurling final and a Thurles Killidangan Seamus Oreen final? I wonder what the odds are on that, because it's not beyond the bounds of possibility.
Well, they're definitely playing each other in the Oreen in the next round. I personally, I don't see it happening. I think Killidangan. I don't know if they have enough quality in the Oreen side to maybe get all the way. But look, they proved me wrong 2 years ago when they got to the intermediate final. It's set up nicely. Like the second round fixtures came out for the weekend after next. It's really the pressure is going to be on everybody in the next, particularly the teams that lost in 2 weeks' time. So it's brilliantly set up, and you have, as I said earlier, you have guys maybe putting up their hand maybe for Tipp selection, like Sean Ryan would have been on the Tipp under 20 panel last year, but he's impressed me so much. He's I don't care. You score 4 goals in a club match, You deserve to have a look at you. And like, look, you can say maybe we have the 2018 and 2019 underage panels to choose from, but like I always look at maybe the likes of Pádraig O'Hora and Mayo, like 27 years of age, and he's probably one outstanding performance in a Mayo win away from being footballer of the year. Like, you just see and we saw Paddy Fitzpatrick to a lesser extent in Clare this year. The guys, like, just because maybe you came through an underage team doesn't mean you want a value. Like, some guys mature differently than others, like, so.
It's a fair point to finish up on. Right, well, thanks to Shane Brophy, Thomas Conway and Paul Jenkins. We'll do it all again. Thanks very much, lads.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, lads.
Welcome to Tippcast by the Nina Guardian.